Apple recently unveiled a bunch of new devices, including the latest iPad. You know, the basic one that doesn't have a Pro or an Air or a Mini tagline, just iPad. Well, I'm here to try and figure out which of Apple's cheapest iPads you should buy. I've just got my hands on the brand new 11th gen iPad, and I know there will be people wondering whether you should buy this or the latest iPad mini now that both have had a recent refresh. Well, in this video, we're going to try and answer that question by looking at how they differ in terms of everyday usability. And yeah, I'm talking about speed and power, the screen quality and size, options for adding accessories, and I'll share my thoughts on who I think should consider buying each of these. Now, I have to be honest, I feel a bit sorry for this iPad. All the recent Apple releases from the iPhones and Macs last year through to the latest budget iPhone 16e, the new iPad Air, and Mac Studio, they're all
designed with Apple Intelligence at its core
and built for Apple Intelligence from the ground up.
They keep hammering this home, and that kind of makes sense. Apple have gone all in on AI, harder than your weird uncle at an all-you-can-eat buffet.
You're advertising all-you-can-eat, and I'm Mr. All-You-Can-Eat, so yeah, bring it on.
Given Apple's obsession with AI, I probably wasn't the only one scratching my big round head when this new iPad was announced with the A16 processor built in, which we last saw in 2023's iPhone 15 and 15 Plus models. By the way, that's one GPU core and one CPU core less than the iPad mini. And yeah, that means no Apple Intelligence for this one. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing because, as I've said multiple times, Apple Intelligence at this point in early 2025 is next to useless, and there is no sign of it getting better anytime soon. But leaving it out of a brand new device does seem like an odd move when pretty much every other Apple device has got it baked in. So if you buy this, you're basically agreeing that from the minute you switch it on, it will never be future-proofed for anything Apple might choose to add on the AI front. Now, that could be important depending on how much you trust that Apple might deliver on their promises from last year's WWDC. Speed-wise then, how does the A16 compare to the iPad mini's A17 Pro chips? Well, I ran some tests and Geekbench found some significant differences between the two, with the iPad mini chip beating the iPad 11th gen in single-core, multi-core and GPU performance. And really, it should do because it's a more advanced chip, it's got more memory to play with, and the starting price is over 50% more than the 11th gen iPad. And that's all well and good in terms of those scores, but in terms of what you'll actually notice in everyday use, things like opening apps up and zipping around the operating system, I think you're unlikely to find the 11th gen iPad is going to hold you up. I mean, it works like an iPad. And with either of these, you can even do quite complex tasks like image editing and even some basic video editing too. And both will let you play games too, as the screens are very similar. They're not identical though, and we will get around to that pretty soon. Now, interestingly, in terms of battery power, despite the difference in size, Apple give both of these devices the same claimed battery life for video watching and web browsing. Now, in my testing, I found this was actually pretty accurate, which begs the question, if there's all this extra space in the iPad 11th gen, why hasn't it got a longer battery life than the iPad mini? If anyone has any ideas why that is, let me know in the comments below. Let's take a look at screens then, and this is where one of the biggest differences lie, certainly on paper anyway. And the iPad mini has a liquid retina display identical to what you'll find in the iPad Air models, and that comes with a decent resolution and a surprisingly large 326 ppi. Now, the iPad 11th gen has a similar screen, but although it has the same max brightness, it's actually not the same, as it has a slightly lower resolution and a lower PPI. In person though, looking at these screens up close, which is how you're probably going to be using them, can you tell? Well, with the brightness dialed right up, to be honest, I really struggled to spot any big differences here. Both of them are super clear, high contrast, glossy displays that showed photos, websites, and video content really, really nicely. Now, the thing most people will be interested to know when it comes to screens, I think, is about this anti-reflective coating and also the full lamination that you get on the iPad mini. Actually, you get that on all the other iPads. The 11th gen iPad is the only iPad that isn't laminated. So what does this actually mean? Well, on a non-laminated display like this new iPad, you get 3 separate layers. There's the LCD, which projects the display, the touch sensor, and then a protective glass layer. If you imagine trying to read a book through a shop window. You can see the words, but there's this extra distance between your eyes and what you're looking at. And this is most apparent if you're using a pen for drawing. So what you write is there, but it just feels slightly removed from the surface, especially if you compare it to one of the fully laminated iPads where it feels and looks like you're actually writing directly onto the screen. Now, all of that might make it sound like you wouldn't want a non-laminated screen, but actually there are some advantages. For example, on a display like this, because all three layers work independently, it makes repairs significantly cheaper because you just replace the part that's broken. But if you're working with a display like the one in the iPad mini, since the entire screen is laminated into a single layer, if there's any damage, the entire thing must be replaced, which makes it much more expensive to repair. And that brings me neatly on to tell you about this week's sponsor, ESR. Now, if you're picking up any of these new iPads, you're going to want to avoid any costly repairs due to damages. And good news, we've got some great options here to help you look after your precious new iPad. And if you're looking for all-round protection, there's this flip case, which still keeps a nice, sleek form factor, as well as keeping the screen, edges, and camera bump safe as houses with this 360-degree cover. This one lets you place the iPad in 3 different landscape positions, as well as prop it up vertically. Plus, there's a little place to keep your Apple Pencil safe. The next thing you'll be wanting is some kind of protection for these lovely glossy displays, so I'm slapping on this tempered glass screen protector. ESR's protectors come in a pack of 2 and have this super easy to use alignment tray, so even if you're as clumsy as me, you'll be able to apply it perfectly every time. And yeah, that means no more annoying bubbles to chase around. Now, if you do happen to drop your iPad screen down and this thing breaks, you can just install another, and it's a fraction of the cost of a full-blown screen repair. And finally, if you don't fancy picking up Apple's own keyboard folio case, ESR's Rebound Bluetooth keyboard case is less than half the price of Apple's option and is way more stable with a proper tilting keyboard that lets you pop it on your lap and set it down to work from anywhere. It's even got a full row of function keys, a massive multi-touch trackpad, and a spot to keep your Apple Pencil safe. You can check out all of ESR's iPad accessories at this code over here or the link in my description. Now, when we're talking about accessories, again, we've got quite a lot of different stuff going on here with these 2 iPads. Well, first of all, there's keyboards. So Apple have started to make it clear which of their iPads deserve their own keyboards lately, and the answer is all of them, almost. This super expensive iPad Pros gets a very premium floaty keyboard. The less expensive iPad Airs get a less expensive floaty keyboard. And the iPad 11th Gen gets this very flimsy flip-out stand thing where the keyboard actually detaches. Now, the iPad mini is the odd one out though. No official Apple keyboard is available for this model, and to be honest, it doesn't really matter too much as there are tons of Bluetooth keyboards to choose from. Now, the other major accessory group for iPads is the Apple Pencil lineup. So the iPad mini supports the new Apple Pencil Pro, which charges wirelessly, and it's got the fancy hover feature with the barrel roll action going on. It's really great for artists, digital note-taking, and just generally as a different way to interact with your iPad. The mini also supports the cheaper USB-C Apple Pencil if you'd rather not spend the big bucks on those Pro accessory features. The iPad 11th Gen, on the other hand, well, there's no compatibility with the Apple Pencil Pro, so you're stuck with just the USB-C charging Apple Pencil as your only option. Now, this still magnetically attaches, but it's not going to give you wireless charging or any of the precise control that you get with the Apple Pencil Pro. And yet, for the price, you'll be able to take notes, mark up documents, and lots more. It's a pretty solid offer. And yet, it's all a bit annoying though, because I reckon there is a Venn diagram of possible iPad users here who would enjoy both of these iPads, but Apple have made it difficult for anyone to live in the middle of that picture. Let's say you want a bigger screen. Great. Get the iPad 11th Gen, but if you want Apple Intelligence and the ability to use the Apple Pencil Pro, no, that's not going to be possible. You'll need to get the iPad mini or maybe an iPad Air instead. If you want a laminated display with high-resolution screen, get an iPad mini. Want anything bigger than 8 inches though? Yeah, you'll have to skip the iPad 11th Gen and go straight to the other iPads if you want a fully laminated display. Suppose you need an iPad with a keyboard. Cool, well the iPad 11th Gen has got one from Apple that works pretty seamlessly using this special connector on the bottom. If you want something similar for a smaller iPad, well bad luck. You're gonna have to resort to hunting down your own Bluetooth option. Do you see what I mean? Just when you're leaning towards one of these, Apple forces you into compromising, or perhaps more tellingly, pushes you to pay hundreds more for one of their more expensive models. It's a very Apple move, and it's very cheeky. So who do I think should buy either of these? Well, let's start with the 11th gen iPad because I think this is a more obvious sell there for a particular kind of user. If you need an iPad with a decent screen which is fast enough to do most everyday tasks like checking your emails, web browsing and looking through your photos, just get this because for the price it's really good value for money, especially now that Apple have bumped up the base storage to 128 gigabytes. If you're looking at this, you probably don't care about having Apple Intelligence or even know what it is, and to be honest, I totally get that. I particularly think this would work well if you're buying an iPad for one of your kids to use whilst traveling or maybe to do their homework on every now and again. It's also great for anyone at the opposite end of the age spectrum, maybe somebody who's retired and just wants a device that lets them do occasional productive work, but mainly gets propped up to watch films and TV on, maybe play some games or FaceTime their family and friends with. For something like that, starting at $329, it's hard not to recommend this to that kind of user. As for the iPad mini, I reckon all the things that make it great also make it a tricky thing to sell. It's palm size, but that means you get a smaller screen, and that also means that the front-facing camera isn't up in the center for video calls like you get with the 11th gen iPad. Now, if you've got poor eyesight, this screen might also be too small for you, especially if you're bumping up the font size to be able to compensate. But it is arguably more powerful, so if you want to use the extra Apple Intelligence features, you'll always have that option with the iPad mini. Plus, this iPad gives you the added choice of working with both of Apple's pencils if you're into drawing or note-taking. Now, here's how I look at it. For most people, an iPad is a companion device. Especially these two iPads, they're really the only true classic iPads that aren't trying to convince you to use them in place of a full-blown computer. If you're thinking about buying one of these, chances are you already own an iPhone, maybe a Mac too, if you've already bought into the Apple ecosystem. And I think size-wise, it's always good to think about the full picture of all your devices and which of them help you do different things. So if you've already got something like a MacBook and maybe a standard size iPhone, maybe a mini iPhone, for me, the iPad mini is the better companion because it sits so nicely between what the other two are already giving you. You might even be able to get along with only this every once in a while. But if you have a larger desktop Mac, maybe a larger 16-inch laptop and a larger phone, I'd probably be thinking about buying a larger iPad, maybe even this 11th gen one, because it occupies the middle ground in a way that the smaller iPad won't really do for you, as well as providing a way to let you get everyday stuff done no matter where you are. Well folks, has this cleared anything up for you? If it has, which of these iPads would you buy and what are you happy to compromise on? Let me know down in the comments. Now, regular viewers will know I'm a massive iPad mini fan through and through. I promise you'll have to prise this one out of my cold hands if you ever wanted to take it off me. I love the form factor. It suits all my use cases perfectly. And if you want to see 18 ways that I use it day to day, check out this video over here. See you next time.